Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hope everybody is doing well as we continue to progress through May of 2024. I know Aaron's usually doing the kickoff to all of the Wednesday shows, but he is traveling for a couple of weeks, so it's going to be me, Brian, doing the kickoffs for a couple of the shows here through the rest of May, and then we'll probably get back to the normal cadence of him kicking off Wednesdays and me doing the weekend shows. But anyways, with that, we've got a fun show today. We had a chance to speak to a longtime friend of both Aaron and I's, and it's actually somebody who I had a chance to work with for a number of years. One of the really good people in our industry. Is one of the really kind of just fun, genuine people in our industry. A gentleman named Jonas Rosland, who Aaron had a chance to speak to him about something that he's been doing for a while. Jonas is somebody who has been heavily involved in open source communities, but just communities in general. A number of different ones that he'll talk about on the show. And what he talks about was kind of a framework that he has in place that he's been using, and he spoke about at the All Things Open conference not too long ago about how he's been using AI to help him, as an assistant, but also help him communicate with his communities. And again, this is probably something that we feel like is a good framework, or at least some usable tips in there for how you can go about using some of these AI assistants, how you can go about kind of reducing a whole bunch of work and toil for things, especially when you've got distributed teams and so forth. And so we thought today would be kind of fun. Aaron dives in with Jonas just about how he, the tools that he uses, the kind of the frameworks and the way he thinks about this, the challenges of managing communities, but you can think about that as managing distributed teams or managing interactions with different groups and so forth. So fun talk today. It was good to have Jonas back on the show. It's been a while since he was on, and we really look forward to this one. So right after the break, Aaron and Jonas will dive into how to use AI to help you manage communities, and how to use how to manage some open activities. Remember when ChatGPT launched? It felt like magic right out of the box. However, as we've now seen, an LLM might be brilliant technology, but it's not accurate by itself. For an enterprise-grade Gen AI app, you have to feed the LLM the reliable, current data. Then it can make connections and provide context. And for that, you need a database with the right capabilities. The team at Neo4j has been exploring how to get results by pairing LLMs with knowledge graphs and vector search. Check out their podcast episode about LLMs and knowledge graphs throughout 2023 at graphstuff.fm. They share tips on retrieval methods, prompt engineering, and much more. Don't miss it. You'll also find the link in the show notes. That's graphstuff.fm.
And we're back. And for today's topic, we actually have returning guest. I guess we could call you old alumnus. I don't want to call you old, but I'll call the time since you've previously been on the podcast old. It was like 200 and something, right? It was years ago.
Yeah.
But we're gonna dig back into our past here, and we're gonna be talking a little bit about building OSS communities, specifically with the addition and enhancement of AI. And this goes back to a talk recently our guest did. So first of all, we want to welcome Jonas Rosland, head of open source community at CIQ, and also executive director at HitSave nonprofit organization. Is that the best way to refer to that, by the way?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So to set this all up, this goes back to a talk you did at All Things Open in 2023. And it was really interesting because it solidified a bunch of things, and we would definitely want to dig into that. But before we do, give everyone a quick background on your time kind of building open source communities and a bit about the foundation as well, because we're definitely going to dig into both areas today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name is Jonas Rosland. I'm from Sweden originally. I've been focused on open source software since 2012, essentially. I've been using open source software pretty much all the time since 2002, when I crashed two of my desktops at my university, and I had to revert to a very, very old desktop machine that could not run Windows well. So I turned into Mandrake at the time. But then, I've been focused on open source contributions, open source experiences. I've been a developer advocate. I've been a community leader, community manager, and just focused on open source for a little over a decade now in various positions. I want to start out, though. I am not a developer. Absolutely not. I can hack away at scripts and things like that, but I am not a developer. I love working with people, which is why I really found my thing when working as a developer advocate, working with people and teaching them about tech, and then diving into the role as a full-time community manager and working with people all day long. I love elevating people, elevating their work, focusing on making sure that they feel welcome and that they are that they enjoy their time in the community.
And actually, we were going to talk about it a little bit later, but I think that segues right into a good next topic, which is, maybe this is a dumb question for some folks out there, but it was really interesting to understand the distinction. You and I have talked about this in the past. What DevRel, like you mentioned, you have a background in DevRel, and it's all the rage, but at the same time, you're not a developer, and so what is the difference between the approach of OSS communities and straight up DevRel teams, right? What's the differences? What's the success? And we kind of, before we hit record, we were kind of joking about some of our past experiences of how success is measured inside orgs, right?
Yeah.
Tell everyone a little bit about that.
I think as a community member within open source communities, you can do a lot more than code. So I was a part of the Kubernetes community for a couple of years, and it was a fantastic experience. I didn't write a line of code within the Kubernetes project because I am not a Go developer, but I helped out in other ways, in no code roles. So a non-code contribution role. So I managed some of the marketing. I managed some of the events that we did for the special interest group contributor experience. And it was just fantastic. We did some documentation. We did blog posts, things that make the community more open and more inviting for other people. We helped a lot of new contributors come in. We worked on the Contributor Summit that is being held. I'm not sure. Yes, I think they are still being held at KubeCon. But they were just fantastic events where 100 people came in and learned how to be contributors for the Kubernetes project. So I helped organize that. I didn't hold the workshops or anything like that, but I helped organize those things, organize the events together with a bunch of other fantastic people within the Kubernetes project, within the community there. So when you look at it that way, from a community perspective, there are so many things that you can do within an open source community that doesn't even touch the code at all. You can be a visual designer. You can be a website builder. You can be a technical writer. You can do a ton of stuff that doesn't even touch code. But then when you look at developer advocacy and developer relations, you need to understand the tech more. Understand the tech and be able to explain the intricacies of the tech to someone. When you're out presenting the technology to someone, you need to understand the tech. While in a non-code role, that's not necessarily critical. It helps, absolutely, if you understand the tech that you're involved, the tech within the community you're involved with, but it's not a requirement. But when you look at it from a developer relations or a developer advocate side, then absolutely you need to understand that.
And so it's funny you mention that because we've talked about DevRel many times over the years on the show, and we've talked about metrics but then it seems like if you're up leveling it even maybe a little bit further, right? And especially if this is your day job, not just something I want to do and help with the community. Do those metrics get even fuzzier? How does an organization, if they have a community manager, how do they measure success of that community? Is it just growth in the community and other metrics like that?
So we defined a way to measure community health at VMware. So me and my colleagues, it's up on GitHub. and maybe we can link that in the show notes as well. We look at community engagement and community health instead of community success. Because when we talk about success, we talk about project success, not community success. And project success is driven by product managers or project managers. So that should be on their side, not community managers. Community managers don't have a say in necessarily the technical roadmap and things like that, and what should be focused on feature-wise. So from a community manager perspective, we listed out a ton of metrics and measurements, some objective, some subjective, when we wanted to look at the health of the community. So we look at things like, are we following the roadmap? Do we have recurring releases? Do we have releases often enough that we keep working towards the roadmap? Is our documentation good? That's a very subjective measurement. But then we look at how many people are we onboarding every quarter? How many people are we losing every quarter? Because a community is a living thing. It grows and it declines, ebbs and flows, and that's normal. That's fine. But we need to look at it at a longer time span and see, is this an ongoing trend? Are we just increasing? If we're just increasing, that's good in one way, but it might also mean that our developers don't have time to answer issues or handle PRs because we might be getting too many. So we need to onboard more maintainers. If we're declining too much, we need to look at why is that happening. Are we not friendly enough? Are we not attentive enough for contributors? So there are a bunch of metrics like that we look at to look at community health instead of community success.
I like that. Now, let's talk about all things open. So you gave a really fascinating talk about using AI tools to accelerate the building of OSS communities. Before I dig into it, let me just say this. Like, I thought it was a really good session, and unfortunately, I don't think there's a recording of it as far as I can tell.
No, there's no recording, unfortunately. But the slide deck is out on my website, though, so you can look at the slide deck.
Okay, good. Yeah, we'll get a link to that then as well. But so give everyone the backstory on how this topic and presentation came to be, because I thought it was a little unique from a format standpoint.
So I've been interested in AI for a long time. I mean, a sci-fi nerd. Of course, AI is super, super cool. And then I saw more and more tools came out, and especially ChatGPT, obviously, but also Stable Diffusion that I've used a lot here at home just to create art for myself, my daughter, just having a lot of fun creating fantasy art. It's just a fantastic tool. Highly recommend anyone to try it out. And that was just for myself. I used ChatGPT to come up with jokes for me and my daughter. I looked at it. I used it for inspiration for a Japan trip that I did last year, and a bunch of other things. And then I looked at it. Maybe I can use this in a more professional setting as well. So I started looking at it and thinking about ways that I could use this for my own job. And I came up with a few things that it really helps with. So the first thing is get rid of a lot of the time-consuming stuff. Brainstorming is great, but can take a long time. ChatGPT and tools like it. I use Claude.ai a lot today. I really like that tool. It helps with brainstorming, and you can iterate with the AI chatbots. So you talk to them, you discuss with them, and you come up with great thoughts together, essentially. I see it as an assistant. And another thing that was really, really helpful is automated meeting note taking. So I can take an hour or 2 hour long video recording of an interview that I have done over at Hit Save, or a meeting that we've done within an open source community, run that through a transcription tool. I use OpenAI's Whisper, which is fantastic. And then I just take the transcription, feed it into one of these chatbots and say, hey, can you please summarize the 10 most important points from this meeting? And it does that. And it does it really well with context, because then it has the context of this specific meeting. And if you give it a specific task, it's with great context. It's way better than just asking it random things, right? Asking it to do random maths and stuff like that. It's not built for that. But summarizing meeting notes is fantastic. Another thing that I also looked at was, how can we improve documentation? So on my team over at VMware, I had technical writers. And as a technical writer, you always need to look at correct grammar, documentation style guides, and things like that. And I had a demo in here in the presentation where I said, according to the Kubernetes documentation style guide, please correct the following paragraph. And I had made some errors in a paragraph. And I had given it the Kubernetes style guide as a document as well. So again, giving it the right type of context, it gave me an exactly correct output and said, this is what you should do instead. This is how you should write specific words, camel case, inline code should be in backticks and stuff like that. So it was just really, really powerful and really useful to create, or rather to get rid of a lot of the time-consuming stuff.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm a victim of I'm the world's worst at camel case. I'll just admit that right up front. So let me ask you this though, because of course that talk was a number of months ago, and the tools are changing constantly, and there's new tools that weren't even available back then, and so
oh yeah,
what's in your toolbox today? And why? Have things changed? Have things stayed the same? Tell everyone a little bit about your journey so far.
So I was experimenting a lot with different tools last year because they were popping up everywhere, and they keep popping up, and I can't keep up. But I read about them. I read about the tools, and I understand the tools. But I have stuck with Claude from Anthropic because of the way that they see handling of personal data. They look at it from an ethical point of view, and I really, really like that. And I want to try to focus on that more rather than just using tools that look cool. But there are some fantastic tools out there. One that I really, really like as well was DocsBot, which can just ingest your own documentation, and all of a sudden, within 10 minutes, you have a chatbot that can respond to questions on your website about your product using your documentation. Just fantastic tool. Fantastic tool.
Yeah. Now, sorry, go ahead.
And all of this leads to you having more time available. And this is something that I've been trying to drive home to everyone that might think about using AI, but might be a little scared of it. I use AI to get more time back in my life, because that is the one thing that you cannot get back. And time is invaluable. You're not getting more of it. I'm not trying to be too drastic here, but it's really important. If I can do something in 15 minutes and produce the same quality within 15 minutes than I do in 3 hours, I'm going to take the 15 minutes. Absolutely. Yeah. Because then I can do something else with the rest of the 2 hour and 45 minutes. I can spend time with my daughter. Maybe I can read something. I can read up on new technology. I can learn things. I can do more things. That doesn't mean that you should increase your workload necessarily, but this is helping you lessen your workload, do things more quickly with a similar type of quality.
Yeah. And so I want to ask a follow-up to that, because you mentioned, especially with Claude, some of the, privacy concerns and all of that. What are you seeing So there's a difference when using a tool that's, in a community, but then there's also like we all come from, big companies, and big companies tend to have regulations of what tools can you use and not use at times, right? And so how do you balance corporate policies and data privacy and using the newest and latest tools, but who knows where that data is going to go? And like, what is your, I'm sure it's always evolving, but what is your current thought process around personal and company data privacy in the AI world?
Yeah, so there's a looking at Claude and looking at Anthropic, they have publicly stated that they will never use your data to train their models unless you send it as feedback or something like that to them. But the stuff that you write in there and the stuff that they output, they will never use as training, which is fantastic. And I really like that approach. There are other companies that do not state that, so they will happily ingest everything that you type in there. And there have been a few news articles about this where people have leaked corporate information about products that are upcoming or stuff like that, and that has been trained into the models, and all of a sudden it's publicly available for anyone, and that's not good. So when you're looking at utilizing a new tool, I think it's really important to look at the privacy policies of the tool. If it's self-hosted, I think that would be preferable. But it can be very costly to self-host something like this. But if you can self-host it, then definitely try to do that. If it's open source, absolutely use that. But if you're using a company, make sure that you look at it from an ethical point of view and also from a company standard point of view. At VMware, they created an AI council, and I was part of the marketing AI council. And it was all about digging into the different AI tools that were available at the time and see which ones lived up to our corporate standards, to see which ones we could use within the company, which ones we were allowed to use. And that helped a lot, because then it wasn't, hey, I can't use anything because it's not allowed. No, we have explicitly allowed these tools. Please use them. We're paying for them. Absolutely use them. So I think that's a really good thing to do. And over here at CIQ, I just drafted up our ethical AI use, and we'll see where that leads. But it's a start, because I think it's important.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, final question on that, and then we'll kind of talk about the other project as well.
Yeah.
What are some of the gaps you see today? Like, what's missing in AI tools today?
Oh, that's a really good question. There are so many tools out there. There was a website that I recommended last year, and I can't recommend it anymore because there are thousands of tools that were listed, and it's really hard to figure out which one is best for you. I don't think anything is really missing right now. Instead, I'm just very, very excited about what's going on. I see videos being created using AI. Just last week, I tried a music tool called Suno, and it was incredible. I asked it in English. I asked it to create a Schlager, a very typical European type of music, in Swedish, singing about how awesome Sweden is. And it did. Right. And it was fantastic. And I played it to my dad. And he was like, "Oh, who's this artist?" I'm like, "No one. This is made by no one." And it was a fantastic song with catchy lyrics, catchy tunes. And it's mind-blowing, and it's a little scary.
Yeah.
It's definitely a little scary. I'm excited, but also a little scared of what's going to happen within the next 5 years, because so much has happened just within the past 3 years. So yeah, I'm just excited to see what's happening. I see regulations coming up and things like that. So we'll see how this all evolves. But right now, I don't think we're missing anything. At least I can't think of anything that's missing right now.
Yeah. Well, and so it's funny you say that about the music generation one. I was just listening to a podcast yesterday, and it was already another service released this week that everyone claims is better than that service from last week.
Yeah. It evolves
and then
so
they were playing a bunch of clips from this, and they were just like, last week was amazing, this week is even better. And I'm just like, I can't keep up with this.
Yeah, I was watching a I can't remember the name of it, but it was a YouTube channel that did this last year as well, where they reviewed this week in AI.
Right.
And it was always like 5 different tools that they tried out. It was like, it's wild. It's wild.
Yeah.
It's so powerful.
No, agreed. So let's talk about your side project.
Yes.
So you were part of the founding team and are exec director of, I'll call it a video game preservation society. Is that one of the best ways to think about it? It's called Hit Save. So how did that come to be, and how did you get involved, and what does it entail to do video game preservation?
Yeah, we call it a video game preservation nonprofit.
Perfect.
We skipped the society because there is a game preservation society over in Japan, and we don't want that confusion. So we just call it a video game nonprofit or a video game preservation organization. So a couple of years ago, I got involved in preserving video games. I've always been a gamer since I was a little kid. And I went over to Japan with one of my best friends from Sweden. I think it was in 2017. And I came home with a whole suitcase full of video games because we went to Akihabara, and it's fantastic just to stroll around and shop there. So I came home with a bunch of games, and then I looked at them and I said, maybe I can help preserve these because I've been playing ROMs all my life. Maybe I can help in some way. So I looked into it and started to get involved with certain preservation groups, all super friendly. And then eventually this turned into discussions about starting up a nonprofit. And I said, yeah, that sounds really interesting. I would love to be a part of that. We have the Video Game History Foundation over on the West Coast. They're fantastic. They do a fantastic job. We have the Strong Museum here in Rochester, Museum of Play, focused on digital preservation of video games and preservation of everything play, essentially, toys, video games, everything. So they're doing fantastic stuff there. So we said, okay, what can we do? Well, we realized that no single organization can do everything, right? So we looked at, okay, what can we do? We have a ton of games. Personally, I've donated a ton of them to the organization. And we looked at what type of games do we really enjoy playing? And what type of games are we most interested in? And because when you have a passion for a specific topic, it makes it much, much easier to work on that topic. And the passion that we have within Hit Save turned out to be indie games. We love indie games. So we pivoted over to indie games, and we help preserve indie games. We talk to indie game developers, get the stories of the people behind the games, not just the stories of the games themselves, but how did you, as a developer, get into this? What's your story? Where did you start? How did you meet all the other people within your group of developers? And it's really fun just talking to them and understanding how they see themselves, how they got into game development, and where they see themselves and their game right now. Some of them we talk to before the game is released, which is super fun. So we get to see a lot of like alpha, beta footage and game design documents and things like that, which is really, really fun. Sometimes we talk to developers right after they released or soon after they released. We talk about the launch. We talk about how that went, how sales went and stuff like that. So it's really interesting. But as we're talking to them, we also preserve a lot of information around the game. So not just the game itself, but game design documents, presentation, pitch decks, meeting notes, you name it. There are a ton of stuff out there. So if you're a game developer or at least a little interested in game development, we have a treasure trove of documents and things like that from games that are published, and you can dig into how they were created. So it's super fun and hopefully something that will be very useful further along in the future. So we try to interview the people right now as they are creating their games instead of trying to hunt them down 20 years from now. Because right now they're in the thick of it. They know everything. They know every little piece of the game. In 20 years, they will have forgotten most of it.
Yeah, and it reminds me of. So I play a bunch of retro games.
Same.
And there's a website called the Digital Antiquarian.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes into super exhausting detail on histories of certain games. And 9 times out of 10, don't get me wrong, like when you play a retro game, it's with a bit of nostalgia and a bit of rose-colored glasses.
Oh, absolutely.
And the games aren't always as awesome as you remember. But what I found fascinating is the story and the journey of how that game came to be is often just as interesting, if not more interesting than that game.
It's just fun to hear it. And so we were at PAX East a couple of weeks ago here, the big video game conference here in Boston. And we actually had a booth there. It was fantastic. We had almost 800 people came to our booth just to talk to us and play video games. We had a retro corner set up. We had an indie corner set up. And we talked to people about preserving video games and the history of video games. And there were a lot of people that said, "Oh, I had no idea that was a thing." So we're here spreading the word, which is good. But then there were a number of people as well that said, "Hey, I would love to work with you on something." And they were YouTube video creators, archivists, people who just wanted to be a part of the preservation efforts, interviewers. There were a ton of people there that really wanted to be a part of this as well in a peripheral way. And it was just super, super cool to see that. And then walking around and talking to the wonderful indie developers who are there, have them explain their games, have a chance to play their games. It's just so much fun. I love it.
No, fantastic. Well, good. I think we'll wrap there. So, Jonas, if everyone wants to reach out to you and learn more about any of our topics today, what's the best way they can get hold of you?
So you can find me at Jonas Rosland on Twitter. Pretty much everywhere. You can find my blog at jonasrosland.com. And definitely check us out. Check out HitSave over at hitsave.org. We really, really appreciate Patreon donations so we can continue with our preservation work here for video game preservation and video game history. So if you have a few dollars, that would be fantastic. But other than that, pop in to our Discord. It's open to everyone. We would love to chat with you all.
Fantastic. Sounds great. So on behalf of Jonas and Brian, who wasn't able to make it this week, thank you everyone for your time. And certainly wherever you get your podcasts, if you enjoy this, please leave us a review if you can, or please tell a friend as well. We love to continue to grow the show through the community. For that, I'm going to wrap for this week, and we will talk to everyone next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.